Sometimes a person travels to another country searching for one thing: adventure, education, a change of scenery, and discovers something completely unexpected, something that reshapes the very foundations of who they are. This is the story of Lisa Vogl-Hamid, a young woman from the American Midwest who grew up in a Christian home, attended church with her grandmother, and never questioned the faith she was born into, until life took her far from everything she knew. At the age of 19, she traveled to Morocco, not as a pilgrim, not as a seeker of truth, but as a young woman eager to experience the world. She taught English in the ancient city of Tangier, lived with a Moroccan family in a small room, and wore the hijab, not out of religious conviction, but to blend in with the culture around her. She returned to America and continued her life, unaware that the seeds of something profound had already been planted. Years later, in a photography class in Florida, she was asked to make a short documentary. She chose a subject she thought she already understood: the hijab. That decision would change everything. What happened next was not a sudden lightning bolt of revelation. It was a slow, careful journey of questions, research, and reflection. A journey that would lead her to compare the Bible with the Qur'an, to meet with scholars, to watch countless hours of lectures, and ultimately, to walk into a mosque on the night of the 19th of Ramadan and declare her faith. This is not a story of a woman who abandoned her past. It is a story of a woman who found answers to questions she had carried her entire life. It is a story of intellectual curiosity, spiritual courage, and the quiet, persistent search for truth. Tonight, as you close your eyes and let the weight of the day slip away, we invite you to journey with her, to walk the streets of Tangier, to sit in the quiet of a mosque, and to witness what happens when a soul, guided by an unseen hand, finally finds its home. Close your eyes, take a slow, deep breath, and let the story begin. Chapter 1: Before the Journey. Lisa Vogl-Hamid was born and raised in East Lansing, Michigan, the daughter of parents from different Christian traditions. Her father's family was Catholic. Her mother's family came from a conservative Baptist background. Her parents divorced when she was an infant, but her father remained an important presence in her life, a man she would later describe as someone she deeply looked up to. Despite her parents' different religious backgrounds, they did not enforce religion upon her as she was growing up. She was not brought up in a strictly religious household, though her mother was described as very spiritual. And yet, something within Lisa, a natural disposition, as she would later describe it, began guiding her closer to God from a young age. Without any pressure from her family, Lisa became deeply attached to Christianity on her own. At around 14 years old, she began attending church regularly with her grandmother. She participated in weekly Bible study groups, joined a Christian ministry called Young Life, and attended church camps during the summer. She was, by all accounts, a committed and sincere young Christian. At the age of 18, Lisa enrolled at Chatham College, an all-girls school in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. She took up softball as a sport and began her college education like many young Americans, full of hope and uncertainty about the future. But after her first year, she made a decision that would set her on an unexpected path. She decided to take a year off from her studies, to travel and gain internship experience. During the first half of that year, she interned at Disney World while working 2 other jobs simultaneously. She saved her money carefully, working long hours with a clear goal in mind. And with the money she had collected, she decided to do something bold: travel to Morocco for 3 months. It was 2005. Lisa was 19 years old. She had no idea that this trip would plant a seed that would take years to bloom. Chapter 2: The Journey to Morocco. When Lisa Vogl arrived in Morocco, she was not searching for a new religion. She was searching for adventure, for cultural experience, for something beyond the familiar horizons of American life. She had traveled before, but she had never encountered such a radically different way of life. She lived in Tangier and taught English at the American Language Center. More significantly, she stayed with a Moroccan family, a family that lived in a 200-square-foot room. They slept, dined, and lived in the same small space. There was no hot water for showers. There was no toilet in the home. Lisa would later describe living in Morocco as the most amazing and humbling experience of her life. The simplicity of life there opened her eyes to something she had never fully considered, that the Western way of life was not the only way, and not necessarily the superior way. It was during this 3-month stay that Lisa was first introduced to Islam, not through formal study, but through daily exposure. She saw people praying 5 times a day. She heard the call to prayer echoing through the streets. She observed the rhythm of a life organized around faith. And she wore the hijab. Every day, Lisa wore the headscarf, but she wore it as a cultural norm to blend in with the locals, to show respect for the traditions of the country she was visiting. She did not understand the religious significance behind it. She never asked the Moroccan family why they wore it, partly because of the language barrier, as they spoke Arabic and she spoke English. She simply accepted it as part of the culture. When she returned to America, she carried with her an appreciation for the life she had left behind. Simple things like taking a hot shower became luxuries she no longer took for granted. She had gained a new perspective on the world. But she did not return with a need for Islam. The trip, as she would later explain, was more of a cultural experience than a religious one. She appreciated the way of life she had witnessed, but she did not yet understand the faith that animated it. That understanding would come later, through a different door entirely. Chapter 3: The Question of the Hijab. After returning from Morocco, Lisa completed her education. She transferred to a private all-girls school and majored in cultural studies and marketing. To graduate, she was required to complete a tutorial, essentially, to write a book-length paper on a topic of her choice. She chose to write about women in the media and their exploitation in Western society. Looking back on that choice, she would later realize that her time in Morocco must have subconsciously given her a different perspective on women and how they should be viewed by society. After graduation, she took a corporate job in Chicago, working at a bank. It was a stable job, a conventional path, but something about it didn't feel right. Ironically, something within me actually didn't feel right working there, she would later reflect. She didn't yet know that working with interest was impermissible in Islam. She simply felt that the job was not aligned with her heart. So she quit. She left the corporate world behind to pursue her true passion, photography. She moved to Florida and enrolled in photography school, determined to follow her dream. It was in her first year at photography school that the course of her life would shift once again. She took a videography class, and the students were asked to make a mini-documentary on a subject of their choice. At the same time, Lisa had become involved with a local charity called Project Downtown, which gathered at a mosque every other Sunday to feed the homeless. Through this work, she met a Muslim woman named Nadine Abu Jabara. Lisa had worn the hijab for 3 months in Morocco, but she had never fully understood its meaning. She had never asked why Muslim women wore it. So, for her documentary project, she decided to explore the hijab. She interviewed Nadine, asking questions like, "Why do you wear hijab? Do people judge you on the streets? What are the misconceptions about hijab?" Nadine's answers were compelling. She spoke about the hijab not as a symbol of oppression, but as a form of protection and empowerment. "People will judge no matter what," Nadine said, "but we as Muslims must be willing to change the perspectives of those we come in contact with." Lisa's eyes were opened. She had worn the hijab without understanding it. Now, for the first time, she was seeing it through the eyes of a woman who had chosen it freely, out of faith. That interview was a turning point. Lisa decided to look further into the verses of the Qur'an about the hijab, and from there, she delved deeper into the religion of Islam. Chapter 4: When Curiosity Became Research. What began as curiosity about the hijab soon became something far more significant. Lisa found herself drawn into a world of questions that she had never fully considered before. She started meeting with scholars. She watched YouTube videos of Islamic lectures. She read more deeply into the Qur'an. She began to compare the Bible with the Qur'an, side by side. What she found surprised her. The two scriptures, she discovered, were very similar in many ways. They shared many of the same prophets, many of the same stories, many of the same moral teachings. But there was a key difference that weighed on her mind. The Bible had always left her with unanswered questions. Despite her sincere Christian faith, despite her years of Bible study and church attendance, there were things she could never fully reconcile. The concept of the Trinity, the nature of Jesus, the relationship between God and humanity, these were mysteries that had never quite settled in her heart. In Islam, she found a different framework, a framework centered on the absolute oneness of God, a framework that presented Jesus as a revered prophet, a servant of God, but not as divine, a framework that, in her view, resolved many of the theological tensions she had felt. She studied the religion for several months. It was not a quick or easy process. She was not looking for an easy answer. She was looking for truth, and she was determined to find it wherever it might lead. Over the next 9 months, her research deepened. She did not rush. She took her time, reading, asking questions, reflecting. She compared what she was discovering in Islam with what she had been taught in Christianity. She weighed the evidence, examined the arguments, and searched her own heart. As she would later describe, many of the teachings of Islam resonated with her. She finally found answers to the questions she had been carrying about this life and the hereafter. The Qur'an, she found, addressed the human condition with a clarity that spoke to her. It spoke of God's mercy, of human purpose, of moral responsibility. It presented a vision of life that was both demanding and liberating. Demanding in its call to worship God alone, liberating in its release from the confusion of doctrines that had never fully made sense to her. She was not yet ready to convert, but she was moving, slowly and deliberately, toward a conclusion that would change everything. Chapter 5: Encountering the Qur'an. As Lisa's research deepened, she found herself spending more and more time with the Qur'an, not just reading it but pondering it, letting its words settle into her heart. The Qur'an speaks of God with a directness that is striking. It does not present God as a distant, unknowable being, but as the one who is closer to the human being than their own jugular vein. The Qur'an calls humanity to reflect, to question, to use their intellect in the search for truth. For Lisa, this was deeply appealing. She had always been a thinker, a questioner. She had never been content with simple answers. And now, she was finding a scripture that invited her to ask questions and provided answers that satisfied her mind and her soul. She was particularly drawn to the Qur'an's teachings about God. The concept of Tawhid, the absolute oneness of God, resolved theological tensions that had troubled her for years. In Islam, God is one, not three in one, not divided into persons, simply one. The creator of the heavens and the earth, the sustainer of all that exists, the most merciful, the most compassionate. She also found herself moved by the Qur'an's treatment of the prophets. Moses, Abraham, Jesus, all were presented as servants of God, human beings chosen to deliver a divine message. They were not divine themselves. They were not objects of worship. They were guides, examples, reminders of the path that leads back to God. This resonated with Lisa's own spiritual journey. She had grown up in a Christian tradition that elevated Jesus to a status that, in her heart, had always felt uncomfortable. Now she was discovering a tradition that honored Jesus as a great prophet while maintaining the absolute sovereignty of God. The Qur'an also spoke to her about the purpose of human life. We are not here by accident, the Qur'an teaches. We are here to worship God, to know God, to live in accordance with His guidance. This is not a burden, it is a privilege, a calling, a path that leads to fulfillment and peace. As Lisa read, she found herself agreeing with more and more of what she encountered. The teachings of Islam, she realized, were not foreign or strange. They were familiar in the deepest sense of the word. They felt like coming home. Chapter 6: The Struggle Between the Old and the New. But accepting Islam was not a simple decision. Lisa was not someone who made life-changing choices lightly. She had been raised in a Christian home. She had attended church regularly. She had participated in Bible studies and youth groups. Christianity was not just a label, it was part of her identity. To leave Christianity and embrace Islam would mean more than changing her beliefs. It would mean stepping into the unknown. It would mean disappointing family members who had raised her in the faith. It would mean facing questions, judgments, and perhaps even rejection from people she loved. One person in particular weighed heavily on her heart: her grandmother. Lisa's grandmother was deeply religious, and Lisa loved her dearly. She knew that converting to Islam would break her grandmother's heart. The thought of causing that pain was almost unbearable. And yet, Lisa could not ignore what she had discovered. She could not pretend that the questions had not been answered. She could not go back to a faith that no longer made sense to her, no matter how much she might wish to. This is the struggle that many converts face, the tension between loyalty to the past and the pull of the truth that has been discovered. It is not a struggle that can be resolved quickly or easily. It requires time, patience, and courage. Lisa took her time. She did not rush into a decision. She continued to study, to reflect, to pray. She sought guidance from scholars and from her own heart. Her journey appears to have involved a gradual realization that the truth she had found in Islam was not something she could abandon. The questions that had been answered, the clarity that had been given, these were not things she could simply set aside. As she would later describe, her decision to convert was the culmination of experiences and encounters, including intelligent reasoning, reflection, and critical thinking. It was not a sudden emotional moment, but the result of a long, careful process of investigation. The night she finally decided to accept Islam, she walked to a small mosque near the university. It was the 19th night of Ramadan, a night of special significance in the Islamic tradition. She told the men there about her discovery, about her journey, about her decision. Chapter 7: The Decision to Embrace Islam. On July 29, 2011, Lisa Vogl took her Shahada, the testimony of faith that marks a person's entry into Islam. It was a Friday, the day before Ramadan began. She walked into a masjid and asked to take her Shahada. The exact circumstances of that moment are known to her alone, but the significance of the date is clear. Ramadan is the month of the Qur'an, the month of fasting, the month of spiritual renewal. To enter Islam on the eve of Ramadan is to begin the journey at the most blessed time of the year. Lisa would later describe her conversion as the best decision I ever made. She felt that, looking back on her journey, it was as if she had always been destined to be Muslim. The trials she faced due to her conversion, she believed, were minuscule compared to the blessings that came to her because of Islam. The decision to convert was not without its challenges. As a white American woman embracing Islam, she entered a community that was often misunderstood and misrepresented in the broader society. She had to learn new practices, new prayers, new ways of living. She had to navigate the expectations of a faith that was both deeply spiritual and richly practical. And she had to face the reactions of those who knew her. Some people were supportive, others were confused, some were hurt. She kept her conversion a secret from her elderly grandmother, knowing that it would break her heart to learn that Lisa had left Christianity. But Lisa did not view her conversion as a rejection of her past. She saw it as a natural progression of her spiritual awareness, a culmination of everything she had experienced and learned. The faith she had grown up with had prepared her for this moment. The questions she had asked, the searching she had done, all of it had led her here. She was not abandoning God. She was finding a clearer, more complete understanding of God. She was moving from a faith that had left her with unanswered questions to a faith that answered them. From that day forward, Lisa Vogl was a Muslim. The journey that had begun in Morocco continued through a photography class and deepened through months of research had reached its destination. But in another sense, it was just beginning. Chapter 8: A New Life and a New Identity. After accepting Islam, Lisa's life began to change in ways she could not have anticipated. Her conversion influenced her work immensely. She continued her photography, but now with a new perspective. She began to see the world through the lens of her faith, a faith that emphasized modesty, dignity, and the importance of inner beauty over outward appearance. In 2013, she began working on a clothing line that would provide affordable yet stylish conservative clothing for Muslim women. She called it Verona Collection. The inspiration came from her own experience. After converting, she struggled to find fashionable, modest clothing that met the requirements of her faith while still expressing her personal style. Verona Collection started small. Lisa used her savings to launch the brand. She and her business partner, Nadine Abu Jabara, the same woman who had opened her eyes to the meaning of the hijab, began with a dress and a couple of scarves. The brand grew slowly, gaining attention within the Muslim community and beyond. In 2016, Verona Collection opened one of the first Islamic fashion stores in a mainstream mall, at the Fashion Square Mall in Orlando, Florida. It was a milestone, not just for Lisa, but for the broader Muslim community in America. Here was a store that catered to Muslim women, offering stylish, modest clothing in a space that was accessible to everyone. But the biggest breakthrough came in 2018. Macy's, one of America's largest department store chains, announced that it would carry Verona Collection. It was the first time a major American retailer had offered a modest clothing line designed by a Muslim convert. The collection included maxi dresses, cardigans, long tops, pants, and hand-dyed hijabs, 19 pieces in total, priced from $12.95 to $84.95. Lisa's story became public. She was featured in interviews with Voice of America, NPR, and numerous other outlets. She spoke about her journey, her faith, and her vision for modest fashion. She became a symbol of what was possible, a Muslim woman, a convert, an entrepreneur, making her mark in the mainstream. But Lisa's life was not without its struggles. She faced challenges in her personal life, including a difficult marriage that ended in divorce. She experienced domestic abuse, a painful chapter that she would later speak about publicly, in the hope of helping other women in similar situations. Through it all, she remained committed to her faith. She credited the values of Islam for her success in business and in life. She continued to design, to create, and to advocate for modest fashion as a choice that empowered women. Chapter 9: What her story reveals. Lisa Vogl-Hamid's journey is more than one woman's story. It is a window into a deeper truth about the human search for meaning. Her story reveals that the path to faith is not always a straight line. It can begin with a simple trip to another country, a casual encounter with a different culture, a question asked in a photography class. It can unfold slowly over years through reading, reflection, and conversation. Her story reveals that faith and reason are not enemies. Lisa did not abandon her intellect when she embraced Islam. She used it. She researched, compared, and questioned. She did not accept Islam because someone told her to. She accepted it because she was convinced it was true. Her story reveals the importance of asking the right questions. Lisa's journey began with a simple question: why do Muslim women wear the hijab? That question led to other questions, deeper questions, questions about God, about faith, about the purpose of life. Her story reveals the courage required to follow the truth wherever it leads. Lisa knew that converting to Islam would not be easy. She knew it would disappoint people she loved. She knew it would make her a minority within a minority. But she did it anyway, because she believed it was the right thing to do. Her story also reveals the danger of judging a faith before understanding it. Lisa had worn the hijab for 3 months without understanding its meaning. She had lived in a Muslim country without truly knowing Islam. It was only when she took the time to ask questions, to listen, to learn, that she began to understand. And her story reveals that spiritual transformation is deeply personal. No two journeys are alike. What works for one person may not work for another. Lisa's path to Islam was shaped by her unique experiences, her unique questions, her unique struggles. But the underlying pattern is universal: the search for truth, the courage to question, the willingness to change. Lisa herself has said that she feels her conversion was pivotal in her life. She sees it not as a break from her past, but as the culmination of everything she had experienced and learned. She believes that her journey was guided by a hand greater than her own, that she was always destined to be Muslim. The journey that continues. And so, we return to where we began. The idea that sometimes a person travels to another country searching for one thing and discovers something completely unexpected. Lisa Vogl-Hamid traveled to Morocco for adventure. She found a different way of life, a different understanding of the world. She wore the hijab without understanding it. She lived among Muslims without knowing Islam. Years later, in a photography class, she made a documentary about the hijab. That project opened a door she had not known existed. It led her to ask questions, to read, to research, to compare, to reflect. And ultimately, it led her to a faith that answered the questions she had carried her entire life. Her journey is a reminder that the most important journey is not the journey across countries, but the journey within. The journey of the soul, searching for meaning, searching for truth, searching for home. Lisa's story is not finished. She continues to live her faith, to build her business, to share her experiences. She has faced challenges, difficult marriages, domestic abuse, the pain of disappointing loved ones. But she has also experienced blessings beyond measure. She has found a community, a purpose, a way of life that gives her peace. As you lie here tonight, in the quiet of your own space, perhaps her story resonates with something in your own heart. Perhaps you too have questions you have never fully answered. Perhaps you too are searching for something you cannot quite name. The story of Lisa Vogl-Hamid is not a prescription. It is not a demand. It is an invitation to reflect, to question, to seek. An invitation to consider that the truth might be found in unexpected places, through unexpected means. Close your eyes now. Feel the stillness of the night. Listen to the quiet rhythm of your own breath. And know that whatever questions you carry, whatever search you are on, you are not alone. The journey of the soul is a journey that continues. And sometimes, the most important step is simply the willingness to ask the next question. May your sleep be peaceful. May your heart be at rest. And may you find the answers you are seeking in the time and way that is meant for you. Good night, dear listener.